Greetings, terrestrials. Today is February 4th, 2021, and these are some strange times indeed. Speaking of which, you're watching Strange Times Indeed with Cliff McCallister. I, of course, am your host, Cliff McCallister, the czar of the bizarre. Tonight on the program, we have so much to talk to you about. Every week on this show, we take calls from people about the things in this world that they can't quite explain, that they can't quite understand. They call in, they share their experiences live on the air with me, the czar of the bizarre, Cliff McCallister. A man whose camera can only focus at this close level to the screen. Folks, tonight we are going to have an incredibly fun show. There is a lot to talk about out there. There is a brand new conspiracy about life underwater. Well, let's get to that in a minute. And get on to our top stories. Howdy, Barefoot and 52. Thanks for commenting in the chat. We love it when y'all chime in the chat at home. Now, we've got some top stories coming out tonight. This first one out of Warwick, England, where a man by the name of Paul Froggatt encountered a 7-foot-tall mantis, an extraterrestrial mantis that had telepathic powers. The psychic says this was an evil 7-foot-tall telepathic alien mantis. And he has drawn a picture of this bizarre creature. Steven, can we get a picture of Paul up so we can have some context? There we go. There's Paul right over there. Look at him and his lovely mantis illustration. Incredible stuff. It's so great to have folks like Paul who are willing to come out and share their stories here. This 7-foot-tall mantis. He fled this creature, stumbling home from his job at a dog food factory in Warwick, England. He said, "It sounds crazy, but I felt I could sense its feelings towards me, and it was just like pure alien hatred. Like this 7-foot mantis. You know, let's see it even bigger, Stephen. Let's get an even bigger look at this mantis. Picture this. Now, I am but a man of about 5 feet 6 inches. This thing's about 7 inches, or 7 feet, 7 whole feet tall. So, I mean, just picture how big that would have to be next to Cliff McCallister, the czar of the bizarre. Just a giant beast. And it's radiating pure telepathic alien hatred at you. I mean, there's just no way you could survive such a thing. It's an absolutely terrifying encounter to have with this giant 7-foot thing. And somehow he gets home. He tells his fellow co-workers about it. He tells them about this 7-foot mantis. He says, you know when you're watching a David Attenborough documentary and you see a spider eating a fly and you just get a malevolent sense of evil? That's what he says he experienced. That's how he describes this mantis. And his co-workers laugh at him. They treat him like a joke. They give him the nickname, the Mantis Man of Warwick. It's so bad he has to quit his job. And we've talked about this before on the show. I think it's disgusting when folks hear these kinds of stories, hear people experiencing things. Isn't there a 7-foot-tall mantis at yes, oh my goodness, there's a picture of me with that mantis, but I completely forgot about it. And that it relates to the show. There's a picture of me with a 7-foot-tall mantis in Dinosaur Land, just so you can kind of get a sense for how big this creature might be. If I had thought ahead more properly, I would have remembered that there is an archival photograph of myself with a mantis being as big as this. But the thing is, without getting sidetracked, it's, I think, absolutely despicable that Paul here is now out of a job because his coworkers want to laugh at him and treat him like a buffoon because he's going to come out and tell the truth about this mantis he witnessed. Here, Paul Froggatt, if you are watching, here at Strange Times Indeed with Cliff McCallister, we stand by you and we stand by your sightings. If you've experienced anything strange, unexplained, bizarre, paranormal, interdimensional, 7-foot mantises, you can call in here. This is a safe place. Paul, we think what your coworkers did to you was absolutely despicable. If you're watching at home, let's get some booze for Paul's coworkers in the chat. Write what you think ought to happen to his coworkers. Nothing awful though, nothing like too bad. Hope they slip in the toilet or something. But certainly, like, no threats of violence, please. Please, we've got a civilized fan base here on Strange Times Indeed with Cliff McCallister and other shows of this ilk, other late night live broadcasting paranormal shows. Yes, Stephen, you can take the mantis down. There is so many that might encourage their followers to go out and leave like hateful comments and cyberbully people. But the only people we cyberbully on this show are politicians like the ones in Oklahoma who are trying to make Sasquatch hunting legal, something we think is absolutely despicable, and we encourage you to reach out to them and let them know what awful low-rent folks they seem to be. They should spend a night with a Sasquatch. That's right, spend a night with a Sasquatch. Don't kill a Sasquatch. Boo to Paul's coworkers. I hope their coffee is always room temperature. Well, that's a very pertinent wish. Nothing worse than room temperature coffee. Oh, I've descended into the blur again. I myself drinking a nice apple tea tonight. It's like a liquid apple pie. So delicious. So nutritious. Our other top story coming in tonight. This is just coming in from the world of science. Scientists have proposed a new particle that could be used as a portal to the fifth dimension. Now, it's hard to describe exactly what a portal to the fifth dimension is, but let's look at it this way. There's 3 main dimensions that you're pertinently familiar with, those being the dimension of length, the dimension of width, and the dimension of depth. That makes up all physical matter. And then the other, the inescapable dimension of time. As we move through it, we're kind of trapped in this moving along a conveyor belt of time. And who's to say how the dimension of time truly works? But without getting into that too much, the fifth dimension is the dimension that distinguishes between light matter, the matter that we can see, the matter that makes sense to us. This is normal physical matter, and dark matter, an unknown and mysterious form of matter that takes up almost half of the universe's mass. And by using this particle, they may be able to open up the ability to view into this dimension, to see the dark matter itself. Now that, I think, has some pretty interesting implications. Anything could happen when it comes to interdimensional travel and discovering what exactly dark matter truly is. The fifth dimension was a great singing group from the 60s. That is true as well, Barefoot and 52. Now tonight, we are going to go on a very special journey here on Strange Times Indeed with Cliff McCallister. Normally, as I have said, we take your calls on this show. And perhaps we will later on in the program. We like to take calls from folks who have experienced things they can't quite explain. Interdimensional beings, extraterrestrials, ghosts, hauntings, paranormal activity. You know, we might have some new viewers tonight if you have not heard. I, Cliff McCallister, the Czar of the Bazaar, am on TikTok now. It has finally occurred. If you wish, you may follow me at Strange Times Indeed on TikTok. That's just it. Type it in. You'll find me there. And if you're new to the show because you're following the TikTok, welcome. Normally, we take your calls. We post the Zoom link in the chat here, and we hear about whatever it is you've experienced, open lines, all sorts of things. Tonight, though, we're delving into a new theory, a new conspiracy theory that has crept up amidst talk of UFO disclosure. To get into it, during the recent stimulus bill package that got sent out, the head of Marco Rubio, I forget the name, the thing that he works for, he put a little thing in there that said the CIA, or not specifically the CIA, the Department of Defense has to disclose everything that they know about unidentified aerial phenomenon. And this has got people pretty excited because over in 180 days from the date of that bill passed, that would be June 25th, we should have disclosure as to what we know about unidentified aerial phenomenon or extraterrestrial life. But there is a new theory coming around that points to the fact that what we know about unidentified aerial phenomenon might not actually be from outside of our solar system. It might not even be from outside of our planet. This theory seems to posit that extraterrestrial and intelligent life does not come from beyond the stars, but actually the depths of our own oceans. Here is the theory that came out. This was posted to the Reddit conspiracy theory page, and this is what kind of got us on this journey. Because while this is a brand new theory, we're going to hear about it right now. This is what it says. I know someone that works for NOAA, that's the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. They track hurricanes and weather phenomenon. The disclosure rumors are 100% true, and the species in question is aquatic. I don't expect anyone to believe me, and that's fine. I know a lot of BS gets posted on here for shits and giggles. I'm just sharing a story from a few weeks ago that I feel is relevant due to all the disclosure talk. I have a college friend that landed a job working for NOAA in a pretty high capacity. I won't say more than that to protect their privacy. Around the holidays, me and said friend were catching up, and they shifted topics to aliens. The friend is very level-headed, and we usually don't talk about stuff like that. We mostly talk about family and work. They asked if I believed in aliens, in which I replied, I'd like to, but we simply don't have enough evidence. Their expression perked up, and they said, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to take me absolutely seriously. Okay, where is this going? I thought. They never seemed so intense in a conversation before, so I braced for some kind of huge personal reveal or something. But they started talking about a Russian submarine incident that happened not too long ago where supposedly a fire broke out on board a nuclear-powered Russian sub and killed everyone on board. They said that was a cover story that Putin came up with for what really happened. The sub was apparently investigating an underwater base that is controlled by non-human entities. They got too close and the sub was destroyed by these beings. My friend went on to detail how most world governments are aware of their presence, yet keep it undisclosed because of the ramifications to society that it may have. Also, because we can't do anything to stop or forcefully reveal them. They said that these beings actively keep us out of certain parts of the ocean. Apparently, their technology is advanced beyond anything we could come up with to negate the insurmountable pressures at extreme ocean depths. They are able to freely enter and exit the water in their craft without displacing or disturbing it physically. They've been captured innumerable times on sonar, traveling at speeds underwater that are impossible as far as human technology or marine biology is concerned. They also mentioned a place called Lake Vostok, and said a very large base was discovered there under the ice, and that Russians have control over the operation there. They told me that NOAA has had thousands of incidents of contact with these underwater beings, and that it's fairly common knowledge amongst certain departments and roles in the organization. They said they have witnessed video, audio, and physical evidence of these beings residing under our oceans. But it is kept under tight wraps by senior officials and whatever government sector controls the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The friend said that the recent disclosure buzz is legit and had been carefully planned. They said they don't know exactly what the details will be, provided to the public, but that in general, it will be made known that there are other beings occupying our planet.
Cliff!
Steven, am I? Oh goodness!
Oh my gosh!
I've frozen.
For one reason or another, someone's trying to silence you right now.
It's quite possibly. Am I still going out?
You're glitching. I can hear you, but your video's glitching.
All right, you let me know if the audio glitches out
All right,
too bad.
I'll let you know.
Hopefully, we can ride this wave out. This is quite possibly interference. This is quite possibly interference. Dirty play.
You've got to be onto something. From
the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. We are about to broadcast some pretty earth-breaking shit. Stuff that you could never imagine. Some kinds of things that are simply about to blow your mind. And the people at the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration have known about this for decades. Not only have they known about it, but folks worldwide have known about it. Other countries have known about it. My friend, this is continued from this piece. My friend also detailed that they have been witnessed outside of these crafts, swimming in the ocean freely by submersible divers and cameras at the bottom of oil rig platforms. They are humanoid and resemble what most people would call the typical gray alien. Oversized head, large dark eyes, no visible ears, small mouths. It's not known how they breathe and move underwater. That's pretty much most of what I was told. They didn't give a date. They just said it will definitely be this year, according to what they have been hearing. Apparently, this is going to be a worldwide disclosure, not a US-specific thing. So this new theory, now coming out, it's mind-blowing to think, Steven. Mind-blowing to think.
I think it's time to ask people to show their strange time faces, their mind-blown faces. What is that? What is that face called?
I think it's your cliff face.
Your cliff face.
It's not a good name. We're not working on the branding tonight.
we had one person send
but when your mind is
in.
blown by something like that. What was that you were saying, Steven? Yes, when you reach something that just blows your mind, what is that face? You can always send us that at strangetipsindeed@gmail.com. And maybe you'll see your face on the show. Just freaking out because something is blowing your mind. And this, truly an incredible theory, that the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration could be responsible for something like this. They're not necessarily responsible, but covering up this thing. This thing being that unidentified aerial phenomenon, extraterrestrials, UFO craft might not be from outer space at all, but from beneath our own seas. Perhaps this is a species that has been there longer than the human race itself. And this sounds like a bizarre and wild new theory, something that's just unfathomable. Something that, like, how would somebody even come up with something like this? You might be thinking to yourself. Well, interestingly enough, we came across this over the course of the summer. One of our field agents, Spencer Sparky Barron, he sent me a message. He said, Cliff, I've come into contact with this book that I think might be of great interest to you. And I think it's simply fortuitous that this book came into our possession this summer. This book titled Invisible Residents by Ivan T. Sanderson. This book, written in 1970, 50 years ago, lays out just precisely this exact theory. that extraterrestrial, that UFO, unidentified aerial phenomenon, is something that stems from our own oceans, from something that stems from beneath our own seas. So it's wild to think that this insane theory that is popping up now in 2021 is the subject of a whole book. And it's something that we have perhaps been ignoring and overlooking for a long, long time. And that's certainly what Ivan T. Sanderson seems to be putting forth here. Let's see what folks are saying in the chat. We've got, what are your thoughts on these extraterrestrials existing in the ocean but presenting humanoid? Is it a chosen form? Well, that's very interesting. And I think to some degree in the description, I'm taking it that was from this part. They said they looked humanoid. Yes, they are humanoid, but resemble the typical gray alien. There's a lot of different theories about different types of aliens, different extraterrestrial species. And the grays are kind of lumped in with humanoids sometime because they have a similar, they're bipedal. They walk on both legs. Now, the grays have over-exaggerated head features. Humanoid doesn't always directly translate to being like they appear as humans, though there are extraterrestrial races that are that way. And it's possible it could be a mix of the two. It could be some that look more like grays. It could be some that look more humanoid. Certainly, it's possible, as it has been believed by some, that there are extraterrestrials who walk among us on the street today. Those very same extraterrestrials could be from beneath our seas. So that's something to posit. But what we really must get into is where this begins. Just how much evidence is out there about these underseas beings, of extraterrestrial craft rising from the sea, in this book written 50 years before this theory should even come out. So will that be part of the coming disclosure? We can only tell. Time will only tell us.
You have a lot of tabs.
But this book, there's a lot of information in here. This is a multi-part series. You've got to understand there's a lot to talk about. And right here, we've got the 9 mysteries that make up the first part of this book. We're going to follow along tonight. We're talking evidence. We're talking about what happened. What events have occurred that lead us to believe that extraterrestrial craft, that unidentified aerial phenomenon, might actually be unidentified aquatic objects. Take a look at this. Invisible residence, a disposition on certain matters maritime and the possibility of intelligent life under the waters of this earth. There are 9 different mysteries in here. The first mystery, really just the overall story of what has happened. No, well, that's a pertinent picture that was on this page, but we're not going to get to that quite yet, Stephen. But I appreciate you thinking on the spot there.
I was trying to help.
You've got
I saw the photo. I put the photo up.
You've got the stuff prepared, but that thing that is pictured here is not even referenced until mystery number 6. And some of these aren't all individual sightings. Mystery number 2, oceanic unidentified aquatic objects. That right there, everything that's happened in the ocean. And a select choice, not even everything, just the best stories, kind of the best of compilation. Unidentified aquatic objects in the sea. Submerged objects, freshwater objects, ancient subaquarine plains. That's this thing right here. We've got lights under the water, the Bermuda Triangle, and the potential for time anomalies. So there is so much going on in this text, so much to cover that may tie into this very, very deep conspiracy theory. And that's why we're talking about it over the course of a couple of episodes. So let's get right into it, because it's already 9:26. We've been keeping the time going so long. We've got a lot to fit in here tonight, folks. Are those Bigfoot toes? They are Bigfoot. They're little Sasquatch toes. Going right through our first mystery. of invisible residents, a disquisition upon certain matters maritime, and the possibility of intelligent life under the waters of this earth. Did you know that it may come as somewhat a shock to all of those good people to learn that by actual count, over 50% of all so-called sightings of UFOs have occurred over, coming from, going away over, or plunging into or coming out of the water? That this fact is known to officialdom manifests from their official publications, but they seem to have left this aquatic factor out of their statistical analysis. In other words, they have been keeping damned quiet about this business, and probably, as I will endeavor to demonstrate, for very good reasons indeed. Right there in the very first chapter, why is this happening over water? Why are all these craft coming out of water? And why are we ignoring it and overlooking it? Why are we keeping it quiet and not connecting that? Why do the officials know about it? And why are they keeping so damned quiet? And I think it seems like this year we might find out exactly why. Now, our first mystery begins as such. One evening in the Antarctic, a Brazilian scientist by the name of Dr. Rubens J. Vilela, seconded to the U.S. Navy's Operation Deep Freeze and aboard an icebreaker, was literally jolted out of both his body and his mind by a something that suddenly came roaring up out of the ice through no less than 37 feet of ice and went up into the sky like a vast silvery bullet. The ship was in Admiralty Bay, which faces the South Atlantic Ocean. The only other witnesses were the officer on watch and the helmsman, as it was extremely cold, an extremely cold day, and all other personnel were below decks. Further, these witnesses saw only the tag end of the performance because they were busy with their charts. But what they did witness was quite enough. Enormous blocks of ice had been hurled high into the air and came cascading down all around the hole, burst through the thick ice sheet, and the water was rolling and apparently boiling where this thing had burst out, while masses of steam issued from both the hole and the descending ice. From Dr. Vilela's description, the spectators were apparently not amused. Nor are we. First of all, this is the kind of report that aggravates everybody, and notably reporters, and for sundry reasons that I will take up in a moment. Second, it infuriates scientists and technologists, and possibly even the Navy, since the story was never officially confirmed. Finally, it unnerves the general public, and particularly the better informed and those inquiring minds. In fact, it is an all-around and damned nuisance to everybody. To begin with, this report was issued quietly, formally, by the U.S. Navy, but only to the Brazilian press, as far as I can ascertain. When the later published it, the European wire services picked it up, and it was promptly denied in official quarters. However, the Spanish-speaking Latin American newspapers reproduced it, notably in Chile. And from these airings, the North American wire services ran it merely as filler, and only once. Then everything returned to abnormal. Just like that. A bizarre thing, a craft breaches out of the Antarctic ice, and it gets published as filler. And nobody thinks that's wild or crazy. But in fact, it's very troubling that something should burst out of a 37-foot thick sheet of ice and blast into the skies. What does that? What is that? If not an unidentified aerial phenomenon, and yet it's coming from beneath our waters. Let's move on. Oceanic UFOs. There's a bit of a difference between oceanic sightings and sea sightings. The sea is a little shallower, and that's why we make this distinction in the book, because their purposes and their reasons for being in these different areas may differ, just given the varying depths of these places. Let's take a look here. Let me make sure we've got the right story. Here we go. This is an example of an oceanic sighting of an unidentified aquatic object. This is coming. This is another story of something coming up out of the ocean, just like the previous story that we heard. The officers and crew were at their evening meal at the time. The master, Captain Julian Lucas Ardanza, received a call on the intercom system from one of his officers, Jorge Montoya, to the effect that there was something strange near the ship. Arriving once on deck, Captain Ardanza beheld a shining object in the sea no more than 50 feet away from the starboard side. It was cigar-shaped, and he estimated its length to be about 105 to 110 feet. And it had a powerful blue and white glow, made no noise whatsoever, and left no wake in the water. There was no sign of any periscope or railing or tower or superstructure. In other words, no external control surfaces or protruding parts. The mystery craft paced the Naviero for 15 minutes. Captain Ardanza estimated its speed at about 25 knots as against the 17 of his own vessel, the old Liberty-type ship built in the USA. The next development, however, was disconcerting to say the least. The mystery craft suddenly dived and passed right under the Naviero and vanished rapidly into the depths at great speed, but as it went, it glowed brightly beneath the water. The Naviero was carrying explosives and gunpowder, and in order to stave off any panic among the crew should they get the idea in their heads that they were being pursued because of their type of cargo, Captain Ardanza and his officers judged it prudent to assemble the crew and tell them what they had seen. In the subsequent interviews with reporters from the Argentine press, the captain said that during his 20 years at sea, he had never seen anything like that before. Chief Officer Carlos Lascas described the object as a submergible UFO with its own illumination. The possibility that the object seen was a whale or a conventional type of submarine is ruled out. The witnesses were firm in their insistence that the luminous cigar looked totally different from a submarine or a whale and could not possibly have been either of these things. The case has been classified by the Argentine mariners authorities as an unidentified submarine object. There's also stories of UFOs crashing into the sea. Here is a tale from 1825 and even earlier incidents of this high.
Perhaps they weren't crashing, right? Like they could be landing.
That's very possible, Stephen. That's very possible. What this does seem to point to, and what the initial theory projects, is that there is an underwater civilization. So when we see these things coming straight in from the sea, then it makes perfect sense that they would have to, that they might just be landing. They might be going to their own underwater civilization. And you got to go in fast. You don't want people to see you. You're a secret civilization living underwater. You don't want to mess with those primitive humans.
When you dive in, you dive in fast.
That's right. This is an account from 1825, another very early sighting that still seems to tie in with this new theory coming out from 2021. This happening outside of Honolulu about 3 o'clock in the morning on the 12th of August. This is held and published in a museum in Honolulu. This incident itself, I do not believe is from Honolulu, but about 3 o'clock this morning, on the 12th of August, 1825, the middle watch on deck was astonished to find everything around them suddenly illuminated. Turning their eyes to the eastward, they beheld a large, round, luminous body rising up about 7 degrees from the water and falling. It was the color of a red-hot cannon shot and appeared about the size of the sun, So it gave so great a light that a pin could be picked up on deck. Now, there's no technological device and harshly to think any sort of natural occurrence in 1825 that is capable of giving off this kind of light. They do not have massive solar flares as we do now. It's hard to, I mean, thing lifts up, comes back down, going in an incredibly bright light. One of the earliest sightings. Here is some encounters from the sea. There are so many. Let's just go into it. Steven, let's roll a quick ad break. And when we get back, a list of sightings from the sea.
Hello, everybody. We are the Comedy Pigs. We're practicing a game we call Scenes from a Hat. Wrong things to say at a eulogy.
I am so gonna miss Mr. I'm just gonna really miss this guy here. He's a good guy.
He just borrowed like $100 from me like Thursday, so just wondering who's gonna pay now that he's dead.
Things you can shout at a football game, but not in bed.
Whoa, you could have drove a dump truck through that gap.
Yeah, we're dealing with a bunch of overpaid prima donnas here.
Man, his brother and his dad are way better at doing that than he is.
Hi.
See you at the show.
Right. Thank
See you at
you,
the shows.
Comedy Pigs.
Thank you, Comedy Pigs.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank
Goodbye,
you.
Comedy
Hey,
Pigs.
you watching at home. Welcome back, terrestrials. Today is February 4th, 2021, and these are some strange times indeed. Here's Strange Times Indeed with Cliff McCallister. Every show is dedicated to the Maryland Ensemble Theater, the only theater with the guts to put us on the air. Right here on twitch.tv/MetComedyNight, you can find tomorrow night at 9 o'clock the Comedy Pigs performing their signature short-form improv show. You can also find them here the Friday after that. And the Friday after that, you can find Oh Crit, the D&D improv troupe. Be sure to follow twitch.tv/MetComedyNight. And if you've enjoyed this show and want to support what we do and see it grow, go ahead and make a donation, a tax-deductible donation at marylandensemble.org/donate. If you're enjoying this show and you are watching on Twitch, hey, did you know that there is a special channel point that you can buy that lets you applaud? It puts the applause right on the screen. It's like being in a real theater in a way, but you have to spend channel points to clap. Is that right, Steven? Is that a good plug for the technology?
That's perfectly right.
Steven spends so much time on this, and I do not understand how it works. I just come here and tell people about extraterrestrial craft.
I don't know how people don't know how to do it necessarily, but really, there's this like little circle thing that you kind of collect channel points, and so like I can press. Will you the light adjust? It won't adjust. I can press this little circle thing, and it says applause, and then I can type a message in like, what am I applauding for? Let's say I'm applauding for Cliff. And I'll say.
Well, that's very touching.
Well, who else would I applaud for?
Well, you're gonna always applaud for yourself, Steven. It's always nice to give it. You don't have to get too big of an ego, but it is nice to give yourself a little pat on the back every now and then.
Whoa! Look at that!
Look, you made that happen. You did that applause, and you
Cliff,
made the applause happen. You should
you're
pat
the
yourself
bomb.
on the back for putting that together. That's some high-tech terrestrial technology.
I'm from the bottom of the ocean.
That's right. Perhaps you got it at the bottom of the ocean. Getting back into our main theme. Extraterrestrial craft coming out of the seas. Is it possible that this intelligent species has been with us all this time beneath the seas, and that our governments know about it and are just now getting ready to disclose this information? It's quite possible. Let's get into a list of sightings from the sea. This is just a sampling of some of the many, many sightings that have occurred over the years, or at least over the years when this book was written. There's a big gap of research between 1970 and now. We're just reading the book. We have not gotten to the point in reality where we are looking up every single sighting that has occurred over water. But here we are. In December 1950, an American seaplane tender, Gardner's Bay, was steaming up the channel from Incheon, Korea, where her personnel sighted two mysterious smoke-trailing objects which struck the water at tremendous speeds. Two huge columns of water rose about 100 feet in height at the point of contact. No aircraft could be sighted overhead, either visually or by radar. The Navy announced identification remains a great mystery, so impossible to tell what shot out of the sky and into the sea here, but didn't seem to come from any overhead planes. On the 1st of April 1952, an object resembling an airplane fell into the Gulf of Mexico, some 200 miles south of Lake Charles City, LA. This was reported SSSO Bermuda, and a search was instituted. Nothing was found, and no aircraft were missing. On February 1955, Annabelle Culverwell of Jerome, Arizona, was on the beach at Ocean Beach near San Diego. She reported that she saw a huge geyser of water at the rear end of what looked like to be a spaceship protruding from the top. The geyser subsided, and at the place where the geyser disappeared was a ring of what looked like woolly clouds. They did not move, even though a strong wind was blowing. On the 22nd of July, 1955, witnesses in Santa Maria, California, reported that a long silvery object emerged from the water. Then, there was the wash tub of Busan, Korea, seen on the 15th of January, 1956. The object was described to military authorities as being about the size of a large wash tub and emitting a blue-gray glow. It was seen falling into the water about 50 yards offshore near Hyundai. It was early enough in the evening to attract the attention of a large number of Korean townsfolk. They reported that the glow continued for about an hour and a half before the object apparently sank into the sea. By this time, Korean National Police had arrived at the scene, and they in turn alerted U.S. Military Police Corporal Ben Elliott, an MP, on patrol duty that night. He was on the scene quickly enough to observe the object floating in the water for almost an hour. He described its glow as being similar to the flames from burning alcohol or benzene. The glow, he said, appeared to be about the size of a large wash tub, but the object itself could not be seen on the surface of the water. None of the witnesses expressed any desire to row out to the object for a closer look. As a result, it eventually sank out of sight and into the sea's depths, without being inspected. At this writing, no further reports concerning the object have been made. So many reports coming from the sea here. One, March from 1959 on the coast of Poland near Kołobrzeg, Polish soldiers saw a sea suddenly become agitated. A triangular object, each side measuring about 4 meters, came out of the water and started to fly in circles over the barracks, then sped away and vanished. On the 22nd of November, 1963, the North Star near Aberdeen, Scotland. The Aberdeen Collier Thrift arrived in Blyth at noon yesterday, 8 hours overdue after an unsuccessful search of Girdle Nest for a mystery object which disappeared into the sea 3 miles astern of the ship. The Thrift was heading south for Blythe when shortly before 6 p.m. on Wednesday evening, 4 members of her crew, including the skipper, Captain J. Murray, saw a flashing red light which passed within a mile of her port side, 15 to 20 feet above sea level, and suddenly disappeared 3 miles astern. Captain Murray alerted Stonehaven Radio, put his vessel about, and made for the spot where the light had vanished. The collier had two radar contacts on her screens, but when she reached within a quarter of a mile of them, they disappeared. The Thrift searched for 3 hours, circling the area several times, and was joined by lifeboats from Aberdeen and Gordon and Shackleton and from RAF Kinross. Blah, 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 blah. It's all over there. Let's get going. So these are things in the sea. Meanwhile, there are submersible events going on. Sightings. Sorry, Cliff, I've been searching for that archive of picture with you in the Mantis, but could not find it. That's because it exists on my computer. Thank you, Barefoot52. That was from a recent expedition. No worries to do the searching for me. We'll have that on a future episode, I'm sure. So we've got instances of craft coming out of the oceans, coming out of the sea, crashing down into the sea, crashing down into the ocean. Advanced craft and technology rising up from the sea, flying around and disappearing off into space. But what about instances in which these craft do not leave the water? What about submersed, unidentified aquatic objects? Well, one such event occurred off the coast of Bodega Bay, California. The same have been reported from what I can call the shallows, but it is not until the end of the 1950s that this bit burst upon us, and burst it did. This succession was kicked off by a report of an incident off Bodega Bay, California, on the 13th of March, 1958, which stated simply that an undersea object which refused to identify itself was spotted by Navy pilots 50 miles northwest of San Francisco. Nearby, naval, air, and sea craft, including 11 destroyers from San Diego, mark you, were rushed to the area, but nothing was found. Among unsatisfactory reports, this takes a pretty high place. Destroyers dashing 500 miles just to look into such an incident would appear to be a rather exaggerated procedure. But then again, the details of the report may well have been garbled. It was just about this time that the Americans were getting really nervous about the Russians. It was known that the latter had the largest fleet of submarines in the world, and there had been funny reports about small pyramidal objects that gave off beeps being deposited all down our eastern seaboard at the edge of the continental shelf from Newfoundland to the Bahamas, and which were assessed as direction finders for potential subaqueous marauders, and thus have been planted by the Russians. Russian submarines were latched onto and tracking our submarines. So we started tagging theirs. I often wonder what the other intelligences, if they exist, think of this childish nonsense, but you'll have to wait until the last chapter to find out what I think. Moreover, said Ruskies were said to have turned up also on our Pacific coast, and have been very bold in their approach to our shores. Thus, everybody was in constant state of alert. However, the Russians appear to have developed a similar case of jitters at about the same time. We nearly came to blows over business more than once, but both parties were jolted back to reality by a number of reports that put an entirely different complexion on the whole matter. And this began with the Golfo Nuevo case in February of 1960. For 2 weeks, the Argentine Navy did everything in its power to track down 2 unidentified submarines detected off of Golfo Nuevo, which measures about 20 by 40 miles. They had assistance from the U.S. Navy experts and sub-hunting equipment, but despite this, an apparently and apparently uncounted tons of explosives, the mystery subs eventually just went away, still unidentified. They were able to stay submerged for several days and could outrun the surface ships. Initially, there was only one sub, the second showing up several days later. All nations owning submarines denied emphatically that the subs were theirs. And in view of the general mystery, wild rumors such as the suggestion that they or it were German submarines which had been cruising around since 1945 spread unchecked. But the Navy, general loss of face notwithstanding, took the matter seriously. Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Barefoot in 52. Thanks for the credit and the applause. This is the kind of hard-hitting journalism we need. Thank you, Panda Fox Comedy. Thank you. There's some very important things being said, and here's why Golfo Nuevo is so impactful. One, it created it created a major incident of some considerable duration that was observed by tens of thousands of people, both civilian and military. Second, nobody, at least of all the military, dared to deny it or explain it away. And third, there was international cooperation. And as the reports state, untold thousands of explosives were dropped within the area of less than 800 square miles without any apparent effect whatsoever on this mysterious visitor. Fourth, the Russians got as bad of a case of jitters as did everybody else, and were almost as quick to deny that they had anything to do with this as they had later to discredit any notion they had anything to do with the assassination of President Kennedy. The Russians are not fools, and they do not want a major war any more than we do, despite all the saber rattling. And every nation owning so much as one submarine could well deny any complicity, because they all knew perfectly well that none of theirs could withstand the pounding that these things did. These submarines, these craft, blasted with explosives, and yet they still remain, they're still there at the bottom of the sea and just drift off on their own. Not really drift off, they drive off, they swim off, for they are their own thing. There's a lot of all of this, is what Ivan T. Sanderson says here. A lot of this, Ivan T. Anderson. We're just trying to get all the information to you so we can break down what it all means in the next episode. There is a lot about all of this that I just plain don't like. In the infamous good old days, fish lived in the water and men lived on land, and while all the other types of animals divided up the two elements one way or another between themselves, nothing lived in the air, at least permanently, through those spores, and birds, called swifts, seemed to spend most of their time therein. Beyond the air was a rather soothing thing called space, which simply meant nothing. Thus, it is rather peeving to have to conceive of life forms indigenous to space and maybe to our own and other atmospheres, but to have to contemplate intelligent living entities, and especially metallurgical ones of the most advanced competence and even of humanoid form, living in our water or hydrosphere, becomes actually annoying. On the other hand, it is more than just tickles my sense of humor, and not only because my greatest delight is teasing stuffed shirt experts, nor even because I have been waiting nearly 30 years to say I told you so, but because it is just another wormhole in our coffin of egocentric, anthropocentric, and terracentric obtuseness. And that these underwater chaps can bat it out at 200 miles an hour at 20,000 feet down when we can't even get going at that depth is just absolutely delicious. To be said, you're a loon. To be said, ready when you are for the mantis pick, Cliff. Thank you, Stephen. We'll bring that up. We'll bring that up when we close out today. My goodness, so many other sightings in Brazil. Here we go. This might be the one that. Well, let's get into this. There have been sightings in freshwater, sightings in lakes. there were sightings outside of, we're going to like speed round this, outside of a reservoir in New Jersey. It brought a big UFO craze. People were coming into New Jersey to see this thing. Ivan T. Sanderson interviewed one of the guards who worked, one of the military personnel who were responsible for keeping an eye on this watershed, because this was, of course, during the Cold War, and there was always fear that someone might poison the water supply or something like that. He's reported many sightings from that area. He said these mysterious lights and these lighted solid objects have been in the area for half a century. None of those seen during the 1966 outbreak of sightings were over any part of the reservoir, but they had all been seen over a small mountain range. Now, of these sightings, he did say this. I think I figured out the applause. Hey, it looks like you figured out the applause. Thank you, Barefoot in 52. We're rolling into this lightning round. We're going to get a few last stories in, and we're going to close out. I promise I won't keep you up too late. These have been other things. There have been other things, and on several occasions witnessed by my men also, but which I will never talk about, even when I have retired and am no longer under regulations. Terrifying, horrible things over this reservoir. Ivan T. Sanderson did not push him on it, but he offered up on his own that these incidents are all concerned some things going into, coming out of, or having been investigated actually in the reservoir. So these extraterrestrial, unidentified flying crafts coming into or going out of this reservoir. This man will never speak about it, but I suppose he will hint at it. The ancient subaquaplane. Stephen, bring up that picture of the old trinket. That's really not an old trinket. That's probably not the best way to say to the indigenous people that put that together. This is a gold artifact, one of 1/4 inches long, from the Colombian National Collection housed at the Banco de la República. It is obviously a trinket, well, I guess that's what the author calls it, and an artist's conception of something he had seen. However, it is not a representation of any kind of animal, but it looks like a very modern delta-winged, steep-climbing jet fighter. Yet, it has been dated at being 1,000 years old. So I think when something of this sort is found and it's 1,000 years old, it's maybe not necessarily a trinket, but clearly a depiction of some sort of plane, some sort of a thing. But there were no planes 1,000 years ago, obviously, and it's similar to a fish, but not quite. The Ivan T. Sanderson himself, a biologist with many biologist contacts, confirms this. Nobody can quite figure out what it is except to say it's clearly some sort of flying device. Perhaps a submersible one. So there it is. This 1,000 years old, something like this is found in a coastal region. All right, so one other thing that might be tied into it as we wrap it up. This is the big kicker. This is some freaky stuff, because as I noted when we started this series, at the end of December 2020, one of the final events of the year, something very much that got overlooked because it was the holiday season, was a disappearance of a boat in the Bermuda Triangle. The Bermuda Triangle, yes, my friend Steven, you can take the picture down, is as powerful and active as it has ever been. And while it does not constantly take things, it does seem that there are rifts in the fabric there that may lead down to this other civilization, or may lead to a different time and space entirely. But one could draw a connection between the disappearances of craft and ships in the Bermuda Triangle and this subatomic intelligent species beneath our seas. Here is what happened when several Navy planes disappeared on their way out of Fort Lauderdale Naval Air Station in Florida. This is the 5th of December, 1945. The incident has been written up many times, but there are some discrepancies among the many versions, all of which were first published in the most reliable newspapers. I take my facts here from Vincent Gaddis's version of the published book Invisible Horizons as being the nearest both to the official version and the better public reports. However, the very well-known radio commentator and more or less the original DJ, Art Ford, has now spent many years investigating all aspects of this case, even to tracking down and interviewing families of the lost men. He has run into some really extraordinary and disturbing facts concerning the affair. His book on the case is to be published shortly as of the time of writing this. So I will not go into further details. What is more, these would seem to concern more of the dilemma of officialdom than the incident of whatever natural phenomenon caused the disappearance of these planes and their crews. 5 TMB Avenger torpedo bombers left the Naval Air Station on a routine patrol flight. Each plane was operated by a pilot, a gunner, and a radio operator. However, on the occasion, one man failed to report for duty. On this occasion, one man failed to report for duty, so that group left one short. A further complication arose later because one of the aboard turned out to have volunteered for the Navy while underage and under a false name. But this point is later cleared up. It was a brilliantly sunny day with clear skies. The plane had been carefully checked, and each plane carrying an inflatable life raft, and each man wore a life jacket. All airmen were experienced. They were airborne at 2 p.m. and were scheduled to fly for 2 hours, some 160 miles due east, out over the Atlantic. Turn north some 40 miles and subsequently return directly to their base. The first radio communication of the lead plane did not come into the base until 3:35 p.m. and curiously, this did not request landing instructions, but instead reported, "Calling tower, this is an emergency. We seem to be off course. We cannot see land. Repeat, we cannot see land." Asked by the tower for their position, the astonishing reply came back, "We're not sure of our position. We can't be sure just where we are. We seem to be lost." Advised by the tower to head due west, an even more astonishing reply came back. "We don't know which way is west. Everything is wrong. Strange. We can't be sure of any direction. Even the ocean doesn't look as it should." After this, the flight disappears. They send out other flying boats to go out and fetch them within minutes. A Martin Mariner flying boat specially prepared for rescue missions was airborne and headed for the last assumed position of the Avenger flight. It kept in contact with the tower for some 15 minutes, but then, when called back in a routine manner, it did not reply. And that was the last heard of it and its crew of 13 experienced men. First, this boat goes missing. Then, the rescue boat goes missing. It's terrifying. And then a little while later, more ships, they come to find the rescue boat. They cannot find the original plane. They cannot find the rescue plane. There's no signs of wreckage, no signs of the people who were aboard these crafts. They have simply disappeared. They have simply vanished. And now it's fine for the ships to go in. Perhaps a rift, perhaps this is something that happens when these subaquatic species make their way from the skies and in to the ocean. That's deeply upsetting. Yes, that's true. Also, hello, Dirty Jokes and Storytelling. Thank you for tuning in. One more tie-in here. Another incident of a plane traveling through the Bermuda Triangle, but this one seems to come through on the other end. These two men relaxing, having a nice, just want to come out and support comedy in this platform. Well, thank you so much, Dirty Jokes and Storytelling, for checking us out here on Strange Times Indeed with Cliff McCallister. It's a part of the Met Comedy Night Twitch program. Now, this final story, they're traveling. They're on a nice private plane going through the Bermuda Triangle. We were finally served dinner, and we had just settled back for a scotch and soda when the huge aircraft that we were in suddenly dropped straight down a couple of 100 feet. The nose did not go down. It was just as we dropped straight down, needless to say, whiskey and soda, glasses, magazines, people, and everything loose on the plane went straight up in the air. We were just beginning to comprehend what had happened, and we were trying to get back into our seats when the plane shot straight up, forcing us down hard into our seats. It was as if a giant hand was holding the plane, jerking it up and down. We finally managed to strap ourselves in and sat with eyes glued, watching the giant wings as they vibrated up and down. The wingtips were fluctuating as much as 20 feet, and the whole plane was groaning under the strain of what seemed to be two forces, one pulling up and the other pulling down. My companion and I were terrified, as we had both traveled a lot before, but neither one of us had ever experienced turbulence such as this. The up and down movement continued for about half an hour, gradually decreasing. Meanwhile, the captain had come back to reassure his 10 frightened passengers that the aircraft would not shake itself to pieces, and also give us a new worry and a decision. With charts, he explained that we could not find Bermuda, and we were unable to make radio contact with either the U.S. or Bermuda. It was as if the U.S. and Bermuda did not exist. We could turn back now and land in Florida, or we could fly past Bermuda and try to establish contact with a radio ship stationed in the Atlantic out past Bermuda. He assured us that we still had enough fuel to make it back to the U.S., and as the turbulence was subsiding, we all decided on the radio ship to try and approach Bermuda from the Atlantic side. During the next hour, the pilot's door was open, and we were able to hear radio operators' efforts to raise Bermuda, the U.S. and the radio ship, with occasional reassurance from the captain that we would make it okay. Finally, after what seemed like hours, a voice loud and clear came over the air. It was a radio ship. We got our bearings, turned back the way we had been coming, and in a very short time had Bermuda on the radio. Needless to say, the lights of the island were a welcome sight, and we all breathed a sigh of relief as the big craft touched down on the ground and rolled to a halt. What surprised us more about the fact that the sky was clear and starry, what surprised us more was the fact that the sky was clear and starry with just a little ground fog around the airport. No storms or reasonable explanation for the radio blackout. Although this happened over 10 years ago, I am still wondering if we were one of the few lucky ones who were caught in the Bermuda Triangle where time and space seemed to disappear, but successfully made it through. I have often thought we could have been just another missing flight down somewhere between New York and Bermuda, on the books as another mysterious disappearance. My companion on the trip was Dr. SSMM, now a surgeon in New York City. Yours truly. Thanks, Gerald C. Hawks. So there you go. A man makes it all the way through. Not dirty jokes, drinks jokes. Well, yep. Yes. We've got to keep hydrating on this show. We have run the gambit. All of these examples of terrifying, frightening, unexplained instances at sea that may tie in to an advanced civilization beneath our waters. I want to leave you tonight with a quote from Nikola Tesla that is from this book. Because if you think this sort of thing is impossible, if you think it's not believable that there may be life under the sea, let me tell you something Nikola Tesla said. He said organic life might undergo modifications, leading to forms which, according to our present ideas of life, are impossible. Changes could be gradual, so I think it is quite possible that in a frozen planet such as our moon, it is as is supposed to be, intelligent beings may still dwell in its interior and not on its surface. What he posits there, what Nikola Tesla proposes, is that organic life may evolve in ways different than we have. After all, there are deep-sea creatures. If we evolved out of the sea and eventually got to this, who's to say that another advanced species stayed in the sea and kept evolving, and that's what we have down there. And they've created their own technology, and they're able to blast up. And that's what these craft are. And of course, a thing that could withstand the pressures of the deepest of seas could also withstand the pressures of space. Who's to say? So that is just the beginning of our Invisible Residence series here on Strange Times Indeed with Cliff McCallister. We're going to be off next week. We're taking the week off. I've got some things to attend to on that Thursday night. But the Thursday after that, I don't have the date in front of me, but just know, don't come here next Thursday. Come here the Thursday after that. And we will get into part 2 of our Invisible Residence series, where we're not going to look at so much what happened, but why it happened and what that means. We're going to explore facts about anomalies, vortices in the hydrosphere, and the potential for an underwater civilization. Part 2 in 2 weeks of our Invisible Residence series. So take your 2 weeks, ponder on that. If you've experienced anything unexplained in the sea, if you have seen crafts emerge from the water that should not be there, that make no sense, go ahead and prep that story, or even write it, mail it to us at strangetipsindeed@gmail.com. Again, that email address, strangetipsindeed@gmail.com. We'll get that on the screen there for you in a minute. If you've enjoyed this show and you want more Cliff McCallister in your life, give me a follow on Instagram at strangetimesindeed. Follow me on Twitter at strangetnd. And guess what? I am now on TikTok, one of the cool TikTok kiddos. That's me, Cliff McCallister, the Czar of the Bizarre. Be sure to follow me there at Strange Times Indeed. I want to give a special thank you to the Maryland Ensemble Theater for allowing us this venue to put the truth out there into the world. The Maryland Ensemble Theater is the only theater with the guts to put us on the air. They've got the only guts. They're the only theater with guts in this town, and they're giving us a venue.
Only theater.
Guts.
And
at the Maryland Ensemble Theater.
We have that photo too, Cliff. I don't want you to forget about.
Oh, yes. And as we did talk about, I want to thank our viewers for sending this in. Barefoot and 52, I believe you did. But I also believe it was our
there we are.
Friend of the show, Isaac, who took that photograph. There I am, approximately with a 7-foot-tall mantis. As we learned at the beginning of the program, a man named Paul Frogert had to quit his job because he was harassed by his own coworkers because he witnessed a 7-foot-tall telepathic extraterrestrial mantis that emanated pure hateful energy at him. So Paul, if you're out there, if you want to share your story live on the show, please give us a call. Get in touch with us at strangetipsindeed@gmail.com. We'll set up an interview ahead of time for you, Paul, to hear your incredible mantis story. Thank you so much to our viewers for joining us tonight. It has been quite the journey into the depths of the sea. Thank you, Steven, so much for teching this show, for keeping those picks up. You are doing a fantastic job, my friend. Thank you, everybody who commented, who applauded. What a fun night. What an educational night. Well, I won't keep you any later than this. It is 10:15 after all on February 4th, 2021. For Strange Times Indeed, I'm Cliff McCallister, the Czar of the Bizarre. Stay strange, terrestrials.